Look, we have a problem, and it's called the Irish housing crisis. Over the last couple of years, the property market crashed here in Ireland. We went from developments popping up left, right and centre to what people know as ghost housing estates. A report from the Irish Examiner claims that over 250 ghost housing estates still exist here in Ireland. This is the sort of thing that everyone thinks, well, why don't we just fix up these houses and snap, the problem's solved.
But fortunately, things aren't so simple, as made clear last year by Jan O'Sullivan, a spokesperson for housing in the Labour Party. One of the problems is that at the time of the boom, housing estates were built in all the wrong places, and some of that was driven by incentives and tax breaks. Not to say that we aren't completing some of these, but the ones remaining aren't in demand due to their location and so make little sense in relation to this issue.
Now, why do you say this old news is cropping up again? Well, with the lack of development in Ireland, and looking at some figures we drew from Focus Ireland, we can see that Irish homelessness is certainly on the rise, and in a big way.
One thing to note is that the 5 red ones at the end of this misrepresenting data. Okay. One thing to note is that the 5 red ones at the end may be misrepresenting data. In March 2018, the definition of homelessness was changed, leading some to believe that these were being intentionally altered to make it look as though the problem isn't as severe as it really is.
But miscategorised is the word used by the housing department. Their claim is as much as 800 individuals weren't properly classed, and the true number is still being established.
Back in 2016, when the number of homeless people neared 7,000, Father Peter McVerry appeared on Drive Time and later on the Pat Kenny Show saying this.
We have more homeless people today in Ireland than at any time since the famine, and the reasons for people becoming homeless are much the same as during the famine. They're being evicted from their private rented accommodation because they can't afford to pay the rents.
Some might say this sort of statement is a grab for attention for the cause, but it appeared that Father McVerry actually did some research before making this statement. If we look at the data, which you may have guessed is very spotty, you can draw the same conclusion as Father McVerry.
Most records up to the 1980s, when homelessness became defined in Irish law, were from the local charities and can't show the full picture, but even with speculation they don't tend to suggest higher homelessness than our current situation. From the famine period and onwards to the early 1920s, the Irish workhouse was the way in which homelessness was kept at bay. I'm sure if any of you have heard about one of these 163 places, you would know that the conditions in which people lived in was some of the worst in Europe at the time.
Although these people weren't classified as homeless at the time, it would be fair to categorise them under today's definition, which includes people who are staying in emergency accommodation, putting that past figure of up to over 200,000 at its peak back in 1851, well above any recent figures we've seen today.
In the 1960s, and most certainly beforehand, the issue of overcrowding in the inner city, where entire families would often have to live in one room, led to the creation of some satellite towns in Dublin, most notably Ballymun and Tallaght. People who lived in the city were told, as shown by this television report, that they were being moved to better accommodation elsewhere. Now, some of the people seemed glad to be leaving the old Georgian houses of the city, but then some were told to leave but weren't given any place to stay before their eviction.
Mrs. Mulligan, how long have you been living here in this house?
47 years.
Do you want to move out?
No.
Well, who wants to move you out? Have the corporation asked you to get out of the house?
Yes, it's condemned.
Do you know why it's condemned?
No.
Well, did they give you any reason why you have to move out of the house?
No. No, they didn't.
What will you do if you have to go out?
They'll have to get me somewhere to go to.
They didn't say where?
No.
We can look at these 3 periods of time when Ireland was in bad shape regarding its housing situation.
What are we really doing differently about it now that the problem's reared its head once again? When asked during an appearance on The Tonight Show, Minister Owen Murphy had this to say.
At the end of the year, we'll bring in about 8,000 new homes into the stock of social housing.
Social houses.
Social houses. About 8,000 new homes into the stock of social housing through building, acquisition and long-term leasing. About 4,400 of those will be directly built by the state. That's twice what we did last year. But what we're talking about is state-led public housing on a massive scale. We're actually talking about...
That's not massive.
It's 110,000 houses over the next 10 years. We already have 6 billion committed to 50,000 houses for the next 4 years under Rebuilding Ireland.
I'm a clown.
More recently, news has come out that the government has launched a €1.25 billion land development agency, with its goal being 150,000 houses in the next 20 years.
An Taoiseach said the Land Development Agency, with capital of 1.25 billion behind it, is a step change in the government's involvement in the housing market. We're going to build new homes and lots of them. That includes social housing, affordable housing, private housing, and cost rental housing on both publicly and privately owned land. With an agency like this being created in Ireland, will it see us kick our past reliance on the public sector to provide housing in Ireland and provide long-term stability for the Irish housing market?
Will this be enough, or will Ireland see itself fall back into the same trap and fail to learn from its own history?
I don't know. Will it?
I don't know. Public don't think so. Fucking look at his Twitter. Fucking
I think it's Twitter.
Owen's Twitter.
Oh, Murphy?